next
I thought you
couple of
weren't
minutes.
drinking coffee, Wags.
That's never a thing.
Yeah, I knew that was BS. Kicking ass, taking names. Now that we got that out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's an idea of like getting people on the bus, right? That just the right people on the bus and then figuring out a spot for them later.
We say all the time, like, you're never going to be more in love with that candidate than you are at the time of hire.
Welcome to another episode of the Cheat Code and Friends podcast. Joined today with Justin Gray and Sean Kester. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Doing great.
Kicking ass, taking names.
We're rolling into a weekend here. We late Friday podcast isn't our normal go. How's the energy levels?
We'll get them going. You know,
We'll go.
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Snort a
you know?
line of pixie sticks. We're good.
I just crushed a cold brew, so I think hopefully they'll kick in here in the next.
I thought you
couple of
weren't
minutes.
drinking coffee, Wags.
That's never a thing.
Yeah, I knew that was BS.
That's never.
Try
I don't
to
know.
tell us. Oh, I'm off. What were you drinking? What was the substitute shortly?
Not for me. I don't substitute.
You just
coffee.
said this the other day. You said like, "Oh, I'm not doing coffee," or maybe it wasn't you were doing so much coffee.
Maybe you
You're talking
mistake.
about
Maybe you
the
mistake
hydration thing.
carbs.
No. What was the hydration thing you were doing? I forget who we were talking to, and you guys were nerding out on some hydration drink.
Yeah, I've got the element. He's going. I'm not drinking coffee at 4:30 in the morning before I work out anymore.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah,
I
so I
was
used to slam an
confused.
espresso, a coffee, hit the gym, and then one day I like totally cramped up from being dehydrated. Like my calves disappeared.
From being old.
Yeah, being old and dehydrated. That's what happened. So now I do creatine and LMNT before I work out. I don't hit a coffee till like 7, and then I continue to crush those throughout the day. But it's one less, I guess.
I'm glad. So that your energy will be high. So
Energy will be good.
now that we got
And
that out of the way.
now that we got my coffee drinking habits out of the way, our guest today joins us to talk about scaling hiring in the seasons of growth, which we're super excited about. Heidi Ojha joins us from Aware Health. Heidi, we're super excited to have you today. When we were talking pre-show, you mentioned you're going through some explosive growth, and with that comes hiring. So a big topic for today's show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I think way back when we initially started talking, I think it was a very interesting process because I had my list of hires I wanted to make, and then you had your recommendations for your list of hires you wanted to make, and they were dramatically different. It was like one of those points where I was like, course correction.
So maybe that's probably a good place to start. Like, you've been running a warehouse health for a number of years now. So, I mean, try to, I guess, look in the Wayback Machine. Like, how did you think about hiring as a new entrepreneur starting a business? Just like, what did hiring represent? Because I find that when we talk to so many founders, hiring almost seems to be kind of an afterthought for a lot of them. Like, they're very focused on product, very focused on like the big, milestones that you can read anywhere, online articles, speakers, subject matter experts, so on and so forth, burn and AR growth and, you name it. But we rarely hear about hiring in pitch decks other than like a pie chart that says like this portion of the money is going towards, new recruiting and so on. It's just not a big part of the conversation. So I'm curious as, how you were thinking about recruiting and hiring.
Yeah. Well, I realized, one of my main jobs running the company is to identify gaps. And when you identify the gap, then you need to figure out who are you hired to fill that gap. But there's a lot,
Ideally.
right? I mean, when you're a new founder, I would assume a lot of founders haven't gone through business school where they're taught all of this. And so you not only have to identify the gap, but like the title of the person for that role. And that seems like maybe obvious to you, but to many founders, that is not. So, yeah, it's like what skills and then what to call that person, what to put in the job description. And then are you going to go to market and post it that JD, or are you going to poach somebody? And so there's a lot of skills in there, right? It's not just an obvious thing of like, oh, this is the list of people I want to hire.
I think it's super interesting that you pointed out the title of the person because we often find that talking to early stage founders and they over index on the title that they need to give that person really, really early. Right. Was there any lessons for you in that, from then to now? Obviously, there's a bunch more experience under your belt in terms of how you consider those titles moving into a role.
Yeah, I think, what we've sort of settled on is, especially in my situation when I'm a solo founder, I really need to have a good like VP of ops, VP of engineering, VP of clinical, and VP of growth. And so under growth, we have um, sales as well as customer success, since it both relates to revenue. And then we're in the works of hiring a marketer. I think one of your recommendations was bring on Jamie, and it's the best decision we've ever made. So thank you so much for that one.
You're
But
welcome.
she heads up our growth. And like, I think those do need to be VPs because they have a lot of responsibility and they have a lot of equity. But then I guess the question becomes like underneath of them, like how to give people titles and how quickly do you change them and promote over time and all of that. So I think titles are free, but you don't want to over index to your point because then there's no room for growth upward.
Yeah, I mean, there's an idea of like getting people on the bus, right? That they're just the right people on the bus and then figuring out a spot for them later, especially at the early stage, because you'll find someone who's amazing. And at the same time, a lot of these roles have to wear a lot of hats and they're not very specific, right? It's like, go own this function and go figure out how to make it work, right? And then we'll bring someone in who's done it before and we'll move you on to the next project. Or at least in my experience, I've been that person before and also seen that person work out well. But so there's a lot of trying to figure out where these people fit. And then to your point, like, in the early stage startup where we like the idea of head of, because it's an ambiguous title that you can move up or down, you can layer them or you can promote them, right? And so it gives them ownership over that function, but doesn't necessarily tie you into VP. There's only one place to go, right? Like you can't really go laterally.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Unless you want to make them all chiefs at some point.
Right.
That's
18 people in your
conversation,
C-suite. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Heidi, it'd probably be helpful to, just give a quick background on your business and where you guys focus and so on, because it's one of those verticals. Well, there's just a lot to unpack there. So I'll let you kind of give a general overview.
Yeah. We're a company that treats members on benefits plans who have shoulder, knee, back pain. And we work with them in a digital health setting, like virtual setting, kind of like this call we're having over video call, to help them get better, but also more importantly, prevent unnecessary orthopedic surgeries. So a lot of times people assume they need surgery and most of them don't. So it helps the individual avoid going under the risk, but it also helps save $100,000-$200,000 surgery for the company that when they're self-insured, they pay for that surgery out of their company's bottom line. So it's very motivating for these companies to avoid any unnecessary care.
Yeah. So for folks that aren't familiar, right? Like you get to a certain size and suddenly, self-insured plans, start to make a lot of sense. And so that's specifically the area that Aware Health focuses on. But also it's it's not a normal offering. I'll put that in air quotes, in terms of like a lot of insurance is one size fits all. You get sick, you go to a doctor, they tell you need, X procedure or X treatment, and that's what you do, right? Like when in actuality, there are a lot of other options out there. And Aware Health is providing one of those options primarily through physical therapy and non-invasive procedures, right? So all of that to say, we do a lot in vertical. Obviously, you guys are in the healthcare vertical, and one of the predominant mentalities that we see is like, I need someone that's from this space, because there's a lot of complexity in, a lot of these vertical areas, certainly healthcare. And it's difficult, especially when a founder is from that space. Obviously you yourself are a doctor. And so you've got a lot of perspective, running a practice and seeing patients. that I think it's often difficult to think that, hey, I can bring someone in that maybe doesn't have that same background, or maybe has a much different background, maybe SaaS in particular, and that tends to be kind of the battle that we see waged all the time. Like, do I hire someone with SaaS experience because obviously, oftentimes they are SaaS, you guys are SaaS, or do I index on the healthcare side? And then a lot of times when people see people looking for both, like, I need this very unicornish candidate out there that's done exactly what we do and is sold to the same buyers that we're selling to, which I think is just very difficult. But I'm curious to get your take on kind of that line of thinking, and where you found success, from a background perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this up because right now I'm actually hiring for our VP of clinical. We started just, I was essentially the VP of clinical, but as the CRO, because I was clinical myself. So when you are clinical, running a clinical company, it's very easy for you to get into the trap of just like seeing patients all the time because you
Mhm.
whereas maybe somebody else wouldn't like get sucked into that, right? And so I'm realizing I need somebody local in the Bay Area in our main office that we just moved into to really head up clinical from like productivity, unit economics perspective, just kind of bring in some of the skills to support the rest of the team. And in that way, I can work less like in the business and more on the business.
Mhm.
I think that'll be really helpful for me moving forward. So I think it could work either way. Either there's like really strong founder market fit, or you can kind of be working on the business from the beginning and not in it as much if you have the right people in place.
What is, so like, even that term, like the right people, what are those kind of ubiquitous traits that you guys have found folks need to have, or at least your high performers, have, that you're kind of modeling, your ongoing recruiting efforts around?
Yeah. What qualities? Gosh, it looks so different for every single hire we've made. And maybe I could just walk through a few of them. But
Sure.
we had somebody resign, and within a week, we had to hire a data analyst or a data science lead. And because that would be a bottleneck for all of our sales if we didn't have that person in place. So it was like really a time sensitive hire for us. And so we just like stayed one night and sent 50 LinkedIn messages out to all these analysts, and we ended up hiring them in a week. But that was like fast and furious. We were just looking for 2 arms, 2 legs, can think through, you know,
Are you breathing?
somebody who could do the job we could plug in. And we got really lucky with that one. Great fit, great person. So yeah, from that to for this VP of clinical, I know that the skills for that role are going to be really important because we're almost like force multiplying that person's brain, if you think about it, like the decision making in our product and our library of resources and everything. So I really wanted to make sure that person had like my designation, which is you can do a residency and then a fellowship training in physical therapy. So I wanted that person to have fellowship training, but you can't just post a job description and get that type of candidate because they're in academics and
Right.
teaching and in the clinic. And so we found a site where we have like all the fellows in the country. And so there's like 8,000 of them. So we're just going through and like sending out this mass campaign to try to get them to move to the Bay Area and interview them. So that looks totally different than the data analysts. And then there's others where we're trying to poach and kind of like figure out what title they want because they're one lower in their company. And so
Mhm.
then we're telling them, well, you can get to the next level quickly and poach them from their company and come to ours. And so I think it's just a mix of the skills you're looking for plus the personal qualities. And probably the last thing is like a really strong excitement for what we're doing as a
Yeah.
company. Because some are like, yeah, I don't know if they have the skills, but they don't know if they want to move. And if they're like lukewarm in the beginning, that's probably not a good recipe for them working out and being, really strong team fit. So, I think, it's a bummer sometimes because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect candidate, and they're like, eh. So I'm like, nope, I'm going to be and pass on them because I want somebody who's like, this is what I want to do with my life.
We say all the time, like, you're never going to be more in love with that candidate than you are at the time of hire, right? Like, kind of goes for every relationship. Like, that is that moment of zen and moment of bliss. So like everything has to be clicking at that point. Certainly. The other thing I take from what you shared is, like, it sounds like a marketing campaign. It sounds like a go to market initiative, and I think, and so many organizations don't treat it as such. It's like, oh, I put this post up on LinkedIn or something like that, and then they're overwhelmed by the thousands of resumes that they're getting, and just becomes really ineffective. Like, treating that as a good campaign in terms of segmentation, and to your point, like, what is my value prop to you? What are you looking for? Like, even figuring out, like, oh, these are folks that want to take that next step, and that's something that you can offer because you're a startup. Like, that's a great value prop, right? And then obviously just having really rigorous and I'd say well-aligned criteria amongst everyone who's going to be a part of that hiring committee is the other half of that. Like, you're not going to bring someone in and one call close anyone. Like, it's a nurturing process. So for me, that sounds just like a typical marketing effort, which I think is great advice.
I think that's a really good point because if you just post a job description and you're passive in that process,
It's the
you don't
worst.
have good pipeline candidates to choose from. Like, your effort in getting a strong pipeline is directly proportional to the person you end up with in the end and how strong of a hire they are. So, I've experimented different ways of doing this. Like, sometimes we're mostly local in our new office in San Francisco, but we also hire remote PTs close to big deals we get across the country. And so I need to hire in Tennessee. So I booked like a co-working space and just did in-person interviews the whole day in the co-working space to see how many people I could like get through and make a decision by the end of the day because we had to roll out with a customer the next month. So yeah, it's been like a big learning curve, but you need a lot of people in the pipeline ideally.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about that process, real quick, Sean, sorry, is that like the intentionality of who you're going after, right? Because that's what gets overwhelming. You're like, how do I sift through these resumes? I don't know what good looks like. It's just a bunch of noise, right? But if you're intentionally saying, this is what good looks like, I can go find it. And then all you're really trying to measure against is your other non-negotiables, the excitement, you know what I mean? Like, that's what you're trying to figure out. We're at one of our portcos right now, and they're looking to hire a bunch of entry-level data scientists, right? One of the non-negotiables is just the ability to communicate. These are young kids, and oftentimes they're foreign, but they need to be able to communicate. So it's like one of those quick non-negotiables. Well, no, you can't communicate. I don't understand what you're saying. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't care what your resume says, right? Or
Right.
so it's just having those things that you can quickly make decisions on, especially when you're in a scenario like you were with your analyst. We got to do it quickly. So hunt, get the ICP down really tight. Here's my non-negotiables. Okay, I can pull the trigger, and you feel relatively confident in that. So I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to it. And yeah, just double click on like it takes a lot of hustle to like go and tons of respect for the process that you ran on that, but to identify and then go after it and be like, I'm going to go find the 30 top people on LinkedIn and send them all a message right now and have a conversation with them and get things hired. Like, there are not enough founders that are willing to do that. And I've seen that happen. And I've seen work for a CEO who was like, I'm going to go find the 30 best sales leaders. I'm going to have a CRO by the end of the month. And it's going to come through, he goes through LinkedIn. All these people had jobs already. None of them wanted to have a conversation, right? And to Justin's point, like, he ran basically a sales campaign against it, and used our own software to do it and keep doing touch points. But the point of the being, like, we worked a lot of founders who they're like, well, we put it out there, like, or they're willing to accept the thousands of applications that come off LinkedIn and waste their time going through each one to find that they're all garbage, because anyone who's looking on LinkedIn for a job probably needs one, right? And so we got to find someone who doesn't need one, and you go recruit for them. So I just wanted to say, like, kudos to that. I think that takes there's a lot of respect for the process you ran, and then like also going on site and getting an office and getting local and like putting name to or face to a name and all of that. Like, those are intangibles that you have as leader, which I think kind of echo or likely echo through the organization, right? And then it just kind of starts from a cultural perspective. But there's not enough founders that understand the importance of hiring, and it's really up to them to do it. I think honestly, like 40% of your time at early stage should be spent trying to hire. And, as it goes on, maybe it drops down to 30% of what you do, but you constantly have to have that funnel of great people. And like, you're the one who's the ultimate leader of that culture. Right. And so you putting, kind of your effort behind it goes a long way.
Yeah, I think the in-person is absolutely critical.
That's
Like
big.
I had a very heated discussion on that a couple weeks back. And that was like they were flabbergasted at that concept. Like, I'm going to fly out there. Yeah, but think about the impact that, especially if you have 10, 20 people in an organization, that every individual has on that very small pool of individuals. Like, you're making a huge investment, not to mention opportunity cost, right? And so I think that's a huge takeaway that I just underscore there. Like, getting out there, getting in front of someone, and like, the notion of like renting a co-working space and being able to add a little bit of scale to that is awesome. So like, I would definitely recommend to anyone who's, I don't even know if there's like, early stage is not even a cutoff from a title or a level in the organization perspective. I do it for everyone. I think as you evolve, there probably becomes that level to where it's like, hey, we've got it down enough where we can, do some of that remotely. But so difficult to really get a read on someone when you're not actually having a conversation, maybe going to dinner with them, whatever it entails. Like, just a huge eye opener.
I know. And like I said, every hire is so different, but for this VP of clinical that we're hiring, they're going to be moving to the Bay Area for this
That's
job.
big.
All of a sudden I'm realizing, all right, part of the hiring process or the interview process needs to be like giving them a tour of where they could live.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I've done that.
Uh-huh. So just kind of thinking what's going to be important to them, and then lining up enough candidates for those in-person interviews, flying in from around the country, and how to, set that up with your team. And so, yeah, it's, there's a lot in it, I think. And then I don't know how much you want to get into beyond the hiring, but it's the negotiation, and then the onboarding experience, which Jamie's talked a ton about, but it's like really making sure they have a really fantastic first month in your company, because that'll set the stage for the future. And like all those skills, I'm learning like 4 years into the company. So,
yeah, talk a little bit about that in terms of onboarding, because I do think that's another big gap.
Really
I mean,
hard.
early stage, you rarely have, even if you did have like a well documented process and engagement materials and so on, like, that's not really where people get the connective tissue from, right? Like, they need to be getting a more of a varied experience and just really experiencing things firsthand. But yet everyone indexes towards just go shadow this person. And that doesn't work in and of itself either. Like, you've got to have a blend there. And so what are you learning in that process from kind of, trying to develop a world-class onboarding program?
Well, I can tell you what we did up until now and what we're going to do moving forward. But
Yeah.
what we did before was we would have a company onboarding and then a departmental or like team-based onboarding, where it's like, overall view of the company, mission, vision, values. And then the departmental or team onboarding would be like the clinical department and what you need to do as a clinician in our company. So like setting that all up, meeting the team, joining the team meetings, like that's what we were doing. Now I'm realizing like, wow, onboarding looks a lot different if you're going to be like really top notch. And so, it's, giving them a swag bag day one. It's the CEO meeting with them every single day in person, because that first week is so critical. Having a buddy that they kind of go to for like water cooler talk and that kind of thing. Just to ask questions, because we had a new hire coming in who's like, it's so quiet in this new office. Like, and we just moved in, so we didn't even think anything of it, but just like putting on some background music made her feel a lot more comfortable. So just having somebody to like bring up those questions to, I think can be really helpful. And then working out all the tech stuff, like, we use the PO TriNet, but it's sometimes not intuitive. Like the the classification of them. And so you just want to iron out all the tech stuff before somebody comes on so that it's not like they have to deal with any ambiguity there.
Yeah, I think it's a great exercise there that I've seen is just, put yourself through the onboarding process. And, like I think where I stole this from initially is actually DoorDash. Like, and this was years ago. I don't know if they still do it, but like they literally made every new employee deliver food. And I think it's for 30 days. Until they get that experience, right? And I was like, wow, why aren't we doing that from, a lot of different perspectives? And so I think the more you can embrace that mentality, what brought that to mind was when you said technology, because, let's face it, like early stage tends to be, and, there are exceptions to every rule, but tends to be such a cluster from a technology perspective. No one knows who the admin is. Oh, I think Steve over there in CS sets up new users on that platform. There's no training. What file structure is crazy. And so like just even going through that process, you really get a feel for, oh, wow, that's pretty frictional. Like we need to do something there. Or I need to, develop some sort of materials to guide someone through. I think that can be, just a great, again, like such a vantage point for someone who's worked in the business for years and just kind of knows where everything's at versus, to your point, like someone coming on and saying like, wow, this is, why don't we have water in the office? Just didn't think about it. Thanks for the feedback.
You feel like being included, I think, is really important, right? There's the small things and requests, but it's like, how can they immediately feel like they're part of this team versus sometimes, if they're the only one in the office on their team or kind of a new program starting or whatever, like, yeah, it's an intentional effort, I think. And I'm learning that as I go along.
Yeah. No one wants to have the terrible first day in school where you're like eating lunch by yourself in a corner, right? I think that's a great analogy to try to avoid in that process. It's a great call out.
Yep, exactly. Like team lunch.
Heidi, you mentioned that data analyst only lasted a week. Is there something there that you learned about your onboarding process that you might have changed, or was there something else that happened there?
Oh gosh, that one was just fast and furious. I was taking calls all day, all night, just trying to get people on the phone. And
I meant like that person that left. Like you said that someone only lasted a week. Like was that something that you learned about how you hired and how you onboarded, or was it something that was separate from that?
No, that person was with us for 2 or 3 years, but they let us know a week ahead of, or like, I guess it ended up in 2 weeks, but to have a week of overlap for training, I needed to hire in a week.
Okay, that makes sense.
Do you find that that's critical to try to, get positions to overlap whenever possible?
Well, that one was because I'm not that analyst. Like, I didn't want to be training that person.
Well, it's funny. The thing I was thinking about when you're talking about onboarding is if you don't have that intentional approach and you leave the person to their own devices for a certain period of time, then you almost lose the opportunity to teach the aware health way, right? They're all coming from some sort of background, some sort of experience and having done things that is relevant to the job they're going to be doing now. And they'll probably just eventually default and punt to, well, I'm just going to do it the way I did it before. And then you start to create chinks in the armor of the culture that you're trying to build as, the sum is greater than its parts, right? So aware health as this massive unit that's all rowing in the same direction, who does it the aware health way, is a lot more powerful than having 50 different PTs that do it. Oh, well, I can do PT. I've been doing PT my whole life. I'll just do it this way. Right. And it starts to break down over time because, patients don't get the same experience and this and that. And I think that's, one of the big levers as you scale is this is the way, right? I don't care how you did it before. We want that experience, but the way is what matters more than anything.
Yeah, and to that point, it's almost like the newer grads I'm finding are a good fit because they're really open-minded and eager. Like, if somebody's ingrained in a certain way of doing things and less flexible, it's not as good of a fit. And I think also just flexibility period, because you might be hired as a clinician, and then this just happened with a clinician we hired. We didn't get this feedback from this RFP for a payer fast enough, and we were like too fast hiring. So he's kind of getting licensed in more states now to fill his schedule. But I'm like, you've got half the time available. Like, I don't want to pay a recruiter if you can be my recruiter. So he's like recruiting for me right now for
Oh,
half of
wow.
the job. And he's like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Welcome.
So it's like that flexibility of like, okay, what needs to be done this month, and even the clinicians, to give an example, we hire them to give patient care. And we're realizing we need to do a cold calling campaign to then convert all the watch listers. So basically, we in a company, there's some people that use the company platform for clinical care. That's
Sure.
the perfect scenario. But then like 80% of the people don't use the platform for our clinical care and they go straight into the surgeon. So we develop these watch lists and we have to convince people to use us who are not using us, who want to go straight into the surgeon. So we currently have a process where all the clinicians and the customer success reps, we divide all the claims, the claimants up, and we have their phone numbers, and we call them on the phone. Like that's super scrappy way of like getting them
What
on
a
the phone
novel idea.
when nothing else is working. And so like it was a process where I talked to the clinical team and I was like, okay, we're going to be cold calling. And I realized looking back, I need to really explain to them why this is necessary in the company, because they're like, we don't cold call. Like, that's not what we're trained to do as clinicians. And it was kind of a big sell to get them involved with it. So yeah, you have to be like super flexible in your mindset. Otherwise, it's like you can't meet the latest need in the company.
Yeah, another thing I was thinking about as we were talking a little bit, hiring and titles and growth and scale. One thing I've always been horrible about is the idea of career pathing. I never
Mm.
cared about it. So I'm like, oh, nobody else cares about this crap, but people really care about it. And so for Jamie, who you mentioned a couple times, is a former colleague of mine and Justin's, and I know that she's really, really good at drawing that path out for people and doing that. But
Oh, yeah.
what have you learned about just that concept of what people, you mentioned it before, like what people want, like what do they want to get out of this thing? And a lot of times it comes down to that.
Oh my God. Josh, it's like a luxury to be able to do that. Honestly, like, and I know that's my job and I know it's important to people and I know Jamie's good at it,
Yes.
but like something's got to give. I'm like, do I make less sales? Do less sales meetings, or am I going to postpone raising this round, or do I skip one-on-ones for the week? Because it's like, at the end of the day, I do struggle finding time to draw that out for people. I think one of the good starting points, Jamie introduced the book by Natalie Dawson, Teamwork. And that's a great book to teach me how to draw out that path for people. But then it's still a matter of finding the time to actually do it, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's a good, kind of little cheat code there as well. Like we used to have a required reading list. It wasn't long. I think it was, for a long time, one book, and then we added like another one to the list. But it's a great way when you're trying to get started on an initiative and you think something really spells out, that concept or methodology in a clear way. Like, hey, read this when you're coming in. And then to your point, I don't know when we really, through a lead MD lens, when we really started getting formal around career paths, but it wasn't, right out of the gate. But it is something that I think the concept is incredibly powerful, not from like your grandfather's career path where it's like, hey, you're going to retire at this organization, but trying to get ahead of what is just the natural tenure for most people these days, which is like 2 to 4 years. And so like, hey, what does that ideal 2 to 4 years look like for you? What would you have to have at the end of that to stay and go on to something else? And where I'm going with this is like the biggest thing that I found coming out of that was like people that were open and honest about that within the hiring process. They're willing to take what became a pretty uncomfortable survey because it asked about things like relationships and family and so on and so forth. Like, and it was all optional. Like, you can basically stop anywhere you wanted, but it became really strongly correlated to folks that like were truthful, wanted to share that information because they saw it as much of a risk to themselves personally to, not be in that job in 6 weeks as we saw as a company for mishiring. And so it's just interesting, those little signals that you develop over time where you figure out like, oh, that makes a really great employee here that aligns to our culture really well.
Yeah, we haven't done this much, but that's a really good idea, I think.
Yeah, specifically when it comes to career pathing and like early stage, I think a lot, from a CEO's perspective is about just setting the vision about the what is possible, right? Because like you don't know if you're going to be around in 5 years or 10 years. Like, to be honest, like you don't know that. And so you can't guarantee someone's going to go from junior marketer to marketing manager and so on and so forth, right? And like you can't really paint that as a linear path. What you can say is that you're going to get from A to C faster than if you went somewhere else because you're going to have everything at your fingertips from an experience standpoint. You're going to be seeing different things at different stages and have these complex problems you're going to have to go solve. So I think what's interesting is like at an early stage, a lot of it, especially, for some of those entry level people, is like painting a big picture about what is possible, right? Well, what is like the adjacent possible about being in that role compared to going to someone who might be larger, where they do have a drawn out 5-year career path that takes forever to get to that team lead or to that manager or whatever it is they want to be. And the other piece is like, I don't know if there was ever a stage, and we got sales up to like 500 plus folks where we had like a linear path, right? Like there was like points where you're like, hey, if you get here, like especially on the sales side, if you're an SDR and you were good, like you could be an AE or you could be an internal recruiter or you go to account management, right? Or like you could go into marketing if you wanted to. You could do all these different things, but like we just wanted you to get to that point where you were successful and prove that you could do the things that you were asked to do and exceed, your goals and plan. And then you could go kind of doing everything. So we had a ton of lateral movement within the organization, right? And like people got to find their niches. Like we had one guy who was one of our better sales reps, and he decided one day that he wanted to get into product, right? And by the time I left, he was one of our directors of product. And like no kidding, like just took his way there, taught himself how to code, did all this stuff, like very, very not, linear to that career path. But I think the picture that he was painted was like, that is possible, right? And you grow with this organization, those are the possibilities.
I love that because, yeah, like I think just like CS could lend its way to going sales direction, and somebody we were interviewing for marketing for CS like ended up being interested in the marketing position. But after hire, there can certainly be those lateral movements. I don't think we've had that as much in our company at our stage yet, but
It'll happen.
I think, yeah, I think also it's tough sometimes when you're in the company and you're with all these other team members and you start to compare yourself against them. Like this person got promoted, this person has a salary. So I think one of the things I'm trying to do, it's hard, but get people to think about their growth trajectory as them versus them, because that's what they have control over. And it's my job to kind of like clearly articulate the vision and then get them to line up their career trajectories so they see that path. But yeah, I think just comparing yourself to yourself each month, each year, and really focusing on the skills that you're developing, because in the end, that makes you in the league for certain salaries way more than what you're getting for your actual base salary. So just helping the team to kind of understand some of that, but iterating at the same time, because like we thought we had our vision, we just completely are changing our vision. And it's probably good to do that because you have to think bigger at every stage. And sometimes my mind is blown. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, all right, we're going to be a $1 billion company, a $4 billion company. Like, what does that look like when we're raising our A? And maybe we're thinking on a small scale, but we need to be thinking about like an AI field system, more engineers we'd hire, and like get ourselves to that point. So I'm going through a process now of like completely revamping our vision. So how does that affect people's growth trajectories? I don't know. Like maybe it just gives them more opportunity.
That's it right there as well. Like in terms of the benefits of startups, I squarely think that rather than like, hey, you're going to get to this point, it is about that journey there, because how many organizations of scale or of size would you be able to go to and participate in vision recasting or participate in, the actual shaping and direction of product? Like that's the horizontal exposure that you get within startups. And just in the same way that, we as the company don't know where someone's going to be explicitly in 4 years, they probably don't know that either. Right. Like they've got some sort of, picture that like, this is what success looks like. If I'm here, I need to get to the C level of whatever that discipline is. But maybe not. Maybe you're finding you don't necessarily like that role. Maybe it's what you went to school for, but now that you're actually operating it day to day, you're not that passionate about it. But if you have that horizontal look, okay, maybe that's a better fit for you over here. Let's get to that competency within the role that you're in, and then get that kind of choose your own adventure aspect flowing. And I find that that's what most people kind of light up about, because if they're honest, like no one knows what things are going to look like in 10 years. And so it really is an experience vacuum.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's creating a marketable experience rather than marketable skills, right? Like you have something that you can lean on that this whole tranche of the market doesn't have, and it gives you that ability to go and do something unique. Well, I think we're getting
That's
close.
why startups are so much fun,
That's right. Wow.
So much opportunity, upward, lateral, like, yeah.
Always.
The three of us are in startups all day, and somehow we all three still have hair. So we're doing something right. But
a lot of gray coming in there.
Yeah. That's a whole other story. That might be my children too. But so big three takeaways for me. As a CEO of a startup, you're always recruiting, right? It's one of those things you learn it's a pretty significant part of your job. The second part was the intentionality of that recruiting. Not just posting, set it, forget it. That's not how you're going to get the people you want. And the thing that I really thought about was the intentional ICP fit, using go-to-market terms, and then the non-negotiables, the things that allow those people to stand out on their own so that you can easily make quick decisions. I thought that was really important. And then the environment that you set in a startup is the thing that you're going to sell, right? Like you can go work for Oracle if you want that straight line path. You can go work for a big healthcare system if you want to do the stair step type of approach and kind of get boxed into this thing. But if you want broad stroke experience to make you an extremely marketable person, whether it's with us for 2 to 4 years or we just make you the best version of yourself and you move on, that's totally fine. That's how you kind of play the risk reward side of what you're doing in a startup. Anything else you think I missed there, Heidi?
When all else fails, you can bring a recruiter in.
I would say in that regard, though, like the advice I would give is like things are going to fail. Like eventually you're going to have to use a recruiter. Like start interviewing and get your bench of recruiters far before you need them. Because when you need to tap them, things have already gone wrong. Most likely, you probably had the job out there for a number of months, and you're not getting the candidates that you want, or maybe you took a swing and it fell through or whatever. That's the other thing. I think just getting proactive, getting ahead of things. And I'd actually say that applies to most vendor types. Just keep a really strong stable of folks that you trust, that they can do the job. Far before you are in that kind of red zone emergency.
Totally.
As we wrap up here, Heidi, a reminder for the audience: who's your ideal customer, and where can they find you and learn more?
Yeah. So we're working with self-insured companies who have about 300 employees or more, and any industry, and they can find me at Heidi@awarehealth.io. I is an igloo, O is an orange. And I will email you back if you email me if you mention in revenue.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Love it. Promo code in revenue.
Cheat code in revenue. That's kind of how it works. All right. Well, thank you, Heidi, for joining us. We greatly appreciate you and your insights. This is a big topic that is hitting pretty much every startup that we talk to all the time. So hopefully some valuable stuff there. If you're listening to us the first or the 15th time, please take a minute to subscribe to the show. It helps expand our reach. Leave some feedback, a like, subscribe. That all helps us out. And you can follow us we have a LinkedIn newsletter. They get all popped there. A million ways you can find us. So please take the time to do so. On behalf of Sean and Justin, Heidi, thank you again. This was another episode of The Cheat Code and Friends.